Welcome to Diecast Restos. I'm Jason, and once again I'm working on something a bit special. As has been a bit of a trend for me this year, I'm recreating a fellow YouTuber's wheels. This time it's the turn of Jonny Smith. He hosts some incredible content on his Late Break Show channel, formerly Car Pervert, including barn finds, car caves, idle chats, car reviews and more. Not only that, but he has been a bit of a staple of the motoring media world for the past couple of decades, in print and on TV's fifth gear. This is his 1967 Volkswagen Beetle 1500 that I'm going to be building today out of a 2023 Matchbox model. I did originally plan to pay homage using an older casting, but that went a bit tits up. The eagle-eyed among you might just spot that in the background of one of my shots. It didn't mean that I didn't have my work cut out for me with this casting. This particular casting dates back as far as 1999. It fell out of production between 2013 and 2018 when it was retooled, but all still featured a quite frankly poorly cast and usually undetailed fabric sunroof. That needed grinding down if I were to get this looking anything like Jonny's Beetle. His Beetle was his first car, which he bought in 1996. It's painted zenith blue, which by his own admission has faded. I'll try and match that shade by using Tamiya's Corsa Grey later on. After sitting dormant since 2004, Jonny set about recommissioning his favourite car during the lockdown period with his brother Greg. Jonny has said he plans to restore the car, and he has been sourcing panels and parts in order to do so. But as with most car obsessives, he doesn't want to start dismantling it until he has finished some of his other unfinished projects. Mods to his car include a period sun visor and a lowered front end. There's a lot that needs doing to this casting to get it looking anywhere near how Jonny's appears, so let's set to work. After the old rivet posts have been drilled and tapped to secure the base later on, and after the paint has been removed, my next step is to buff up the body with a wire brush. I use a steel wire brush attachment for my rotary tool, then use a narrower one to get down into all the hard to reach and curved areas. This will allow the primer to adhere to the otherwise shiny bare metal surfaces better. It will take a few rounds of grinding and priming to perfect the finish as I start on my long journey to remove that ruffled sunroof. There's a distinct flat step in the roof where the sunroof starts and ends, which will obviously need rounding in order to replicate the Beetle's distinctive curvaceous shape. The front step might come in handy though when it comes to fitting my sun visor replica. You can see quite clearly that the roof needs more work here. You may be wondering why I chose this model for this project when so many Beetle models are available at 1:64 scale. Well, what I liked most about it were the bumper overriders moulded into the base. Other manufacturers' proportions generally looked off, either too tall or too narrow. Some, like the Majorette that I was going to use, had an open sunroof. The Corgi Junior's version was a bit too short at the back. So I settled on the Matchbox after briefly flirting with the Majorette, even with its aggravating sunroof that needed obliterating. After I've modified the base to allow the ride height to be reduced, I pair up the model to its wheels that I've chosen for this build. I couldn't find a perfect match for Jonny's MP Lemmet Sprint Star wheels, but these are the closest I could find. Hopefully they won't look too far off the mark when that project has come together. It's hello to a nice smooth rear bumper and goodbye to the unnecessary tow hook as the casting gets a second coat of primer. It's certainly looking a lot smoother this time around. With that minor base modification complete, that also gets a coat of Tamiya's fine surface primer. It'll be repainted later on due to those moulded bumpers. The running boards will also be painted in. Here comes the sun visor, which I've cut out of plastic from a tub of potato salad. Seriously. This clear blue looks great on it. There's a hole in it for a little aerial to poke through too. Still unsatisfied with the finish of the sunroof removal, I used some wet and dry paper to try and improve it. With the third and hopefully final coat of body primer now drying, I move on to the interior, which gets its first coating. Sadly, the interior is a bit basic on the Matchbox, especially when compared to the Majorette, which I'll show you in another video in future. Next up is a black base coat for the base, ready for it to accept Tamiya's metallic silver in a little while. So let's get back to the model, where we're painting it in Tamiya's polycarbonate PS32 Corsa Grey. What I love about this is its bluish tint. While it's definitely not a typical pale blue shade, it does dry to appear more blue than it initially lets on. The interior gets a quick spray to match, as the dash is body coloured. The upholstery gets its own colour shortly. This is one of my favourite paints to apply. It goes on so thick over the black, very satisfying. The result really does please me time and again. There is more work to do on this base yet though. It will later get some more colour for the running boards, which is in fact the same colour as I'm using here for this interior. I'd already applied Tamiya masking tape over the dash to retain its Corsa Grey colour. Here I'm using some epoxy putty to recreate the Beetle's aerial with orange orb atop it. I think it's a Union 76 ball, but I may be wrong. Jonny can correct me if I am. Sadly though, this paint had aerated, leaving bubbles on the surface. I did try to fix things, but it couldn't be saved. So I stick it in liquid paint stripper and start again. This casting has truly been unforgiving. Let's focus on something positive and progressive for a minute with the wheels. They're getting their first coat of primer, ready for their mismatching paint jobs. Beneath the cutaway tow hooks sat the exhaust pipes. I enhanced these with my Artistro paint pen. Once the epoxy putty has dried, I then need to paint the aerial ball orange. And with the interior fully painted, it's time to remove the Tamiya masking tape, revealing the Corsa Grey dash. With one satisfying last pull, the colour is revealed. That means I can then add in some interior detail. Often I do some minor interior modifications, but with this I decided to work with what I had. The smoky tinted window piece will obscure a lot of what's inside anyway. Now the wheels, which will become the rear set, are getting their first hit of black paint. I'll be drawing silver lines onto these later to replicate the design of Jonny's Sprint Stars. As for the fronts, well, they're getting a simple silver finish. The interior piece is finalised with a clear coat before we move on to what feels like my 10th attempt at getting this paint to work. But I've got a feeling this time I will get it right. I'm very cautious in applying the Corsa Grey this time around, checking for any signs of lumps or bubbles as I go. And do you want to know a secret? It actually worked this time. Anyway, now I'm detailing those rear wheels, trying hard to create a similar look to the real things. After they're done, they also receive a clear coat. What I'm doing now is finally starting work on all of the exterior trim details, kicking off with the chrome window surrounds. For this, I use my 1 and 2mm Molotochrome paint pens. The thicker pen covers the bulk of those areas and sharper edges, while the thinner one gets down into all the harder to reach spots. It's also better at pulling deeper cast areas, like this rear grille. Then the intricate rear light clusters, ready for a touch of colour shortly. Next, it's the turn of the door handles and hinges. Then it's the lower arch chrome trim. And not forgetting the windscreen surround. It's a slow, delicate process, but absolutely my favourite physical part of my builds. The headlight base is added, which will later be enhanced to make them stand out some more. Thankfully, Mattel cast the horn grills, which I shall pick out and gain further detail. But next is the application of colour. The front turn signals are behind the headlamp lens on Jonny's car, while the rears are amber over red. While everything dries, let's take a break from the finer detailing to apply the grey of the running boards to the base piece. Then we're straight back to it with a little help from my Tamiya masking tape, assisting with the chrome strips. Once more, the bulkier Molotov does the heavy lifting and the 1mm picks up the pieces, finishing off the ends by sharpening them. After the satisfying removal of the tape has been and gone, I set to work on some visual enhancements, namely detailing the horn grills before moving on to applying Citadel Gloss Nuln Oil. What this does for me is a couple of things. It deepens the appearance of light clusters and what would otherwise be flat headlights. The other thing is exaggerating the actual depth of some of the cast areas, like the rear engine cover grille. With that side of things now complete, it's time to apply my custom-made decals to Jonny's baby Beetle. The rear edge plate went straight onto the square cast area on the model, while the front one and the rear mud flap decals are being laid onto a sheet of thin white styrene. All of these are brushed with the fantastically named Mr. Mark Softer decal setting solution. One more decal I nearly missed was the Volkswagen emblem on the bonnet. This and the rear plate didn't miss the Mr. Mark Softer, I just forgot to record that part. With everything that needs a clear coat now in place, the casting gets blasted with Mr. Hobby Top Coat Gloss. Then I can cut out my mud flaps and front number plate from the styrene and glue them directly onto the base. I'm digging how these mud flaps have turned out. Everything is finally falling into place with this model, and I'm falling in love with the project again, especially after all the trials and tribulations with the paint. I've even added in the little Deutschland D identifier to the rear overrider. This sun visor might divide opinion, I think. My two penneth is that it really gives the car a unique identity, though it may look a little odd at this scale as it needed a fair bit of overhang to allow for enough of an attachment point. But with the aerial attached, that is basically that for the build. Now to reassemble it. There aren't many components to it, what with the wheels already at home on the base. First to go in is the transparency, and that is promptly followed by the interior. Then I can reacquaint the body and base for the first time since my wheel test earlier. The model is secured with a pair of 3mm M2 laptop screws, and the axle ends are coated black before the pièce de résistance is added, a little jewel to replicate the fog lamp. So this was how today's project started out. A 2023 Polizei liveried Matchbox 1962 VW Beetle. I chose this over a wealth of other castings as my favoured basis for this project. Despite the cast-in sunroof, it offered more features than any other 1 in 64 offering. Whatever I chose, all would need a decent amount of work doing to them to turn it into Jonny Smith's Beetle. But here's the result of my blood, sweat and tears. After many attempts, I finally got the paint to work for me. When I got there, I enhanced it with some trim detailing and decals. And that was after I'd toiled with removing the sunroof casting. I put a lot of effort into getting the base right with its overriders, running boards, removed tow hook, reg plate, mud flaps, Deutschland identifier and fog lamp addition. It was tricky matching the wheels, but I don't think they look a million miles off. I also added in the Beetle's distinctive sun visor, plus the orange ball-topped aerial. All in all, I think it turned out pretty well, but tell me why you think it's good or bad, and keen listeners, tell me how many tenuous Beetles references I made in the comments. I hope Jonny likes how his baby Beetle ended up looking. Be sure to like and subscribe, but all that leaves me to say is thanks for watching, and I'll see you again for the next one. Bye for now.